I'm Marla Ellerman. I'm publisher of Mobile Marketing and Technology Online. We're here at Transact16 with Chester Ritchie, who is head of US for Zooz. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Zooz?
Yeah, so recently joined Zooz up in San Francisco. Was happy that they asked me to come on board to head up the US. So we put an office building up in San Francisco where all the technology innovations happening, especially in the payment space. And the reason why I was interested in Zooz is they've created something nobody else in our industry has, which is literally a payments router for routing international payments to best cost, least cost type of switching activity that they do. And it's just technology. They don't do the acquiring at all. The reason why that's important is usually the acquiring stifles the technology development, but being in San Francisco where all the innovation's happening and just concentrating on the technology really allows Zooz to have a unique solution that anyone in the industry can use. So if you're a large e-com player, we can connect you to over 65 different banks and financial institutions around the world, give you access to all those different alternative payment types. So in places like China, in addition to having connectivity to acquirers in China, now you can support Alipay, PayEasy, China Union Pay. Over in Europe, in addition to all the major card brands, you need to support things like Klarna. We support that down in Brazil, Bellotto, on and on and on. So we really help people navigate the complicated waters of international payments through the technology. So we have both the technology and the industry experts that can help any big e-com player or app or web type of developer that's out there.
So do you have the relationships with all those banks out there, or is it just because it's an open platform?
Yeah, so great question. The difference between Zooz and let's say an acquirer that's offering some type of international payments is that's more of a what we call a closed garden approach, meaning you have to use them for your acquiring. Where with Zooz, it really allows the merchant to take back their own power because it's just a piece of tech. It's a tech stack or an extraction layer that allows them to maintain their own direct relationships with those acquirers themselves. The benefit to that is when we get into things like dynamically routing transactions to best cost, least cost, they get to keep all those benefits themselves because the router may decide, hey, the best route for a particular transaction isn't necessarily your main acquirer. It could be a secondary acquirer in a country somewhere else. A great example of that is if you were shopping at Burberry in China, let's say, rather than sending that transaction back to the US, what the Zooz router does is it figures out, hey, Marla's in China, I'm going to route the transaction to a Chinese acquirer. And what that does is that avoids all the cross-border fees that usually eat up these e-com guys.
Interesting. And so your business model would be taking a percentage of that and per transaction fee?
Not at all. So again, that gets into the acquiring world where you're usually paying a percentage or a fee per the transaction. What Zooz does is we just charge a few pennies for each transaction. So no percentage of the transaction whatsoever. So very, very low cost.
Super cool. Tell us about the Android Pay deal that was just announced a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, so this is a great example of the technology being stunted if you're an acquirer. So when Android Pay and Apple Pay first came out, you saw lots of people announcing that they supported it. But what they were really supporting is just the tap and pay for NFC because they didn't have to do any work. And they can't do any work because those legacy platforms are really built for just transacting billions and billions of transactions, not so much any of the technology innovation. What you didn't hear is that they're supporting Apple Pay and Android Pay for e-com transactions or mobile transactions. So when you go to a website, you should also see that Apple Pay button or that Android button on the website, and now you're using your mobile device and you're paying straight off of your mobile, right? Nobody's doing that. But we just recently rolled out Android Pay in Europe with Google that allows you to do that exactly. So again, rather than having to do that development work yourself, just integrate once to the Zooz platform and you get all this great technology as a part of it.
Is it an API that integrates you to that?
Yeah, simple RESTful API.
Okay.
So everybody knows REST. Just come into the REST API and it opens up the world for you.
And is there any one-time startup charge or application fee?
No, so literally just pennies on each transaction.
That's cool. So let's talk about another one of the deals that I heard about was Get Taxi, which is now called Get.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us about that.
Yeah, so Get is an Uber type of application once you get outside the US. Different regulations in the the taxi service type of industry. So where Uber's not, Get usually is. And what Get ran into is they wanted to expand globally, but they were having to do a separate R&D integration with every acquirer or country that they went into. So rather than sitting there and duplicating that effort over and over again, what they did is they found Zooz, and then they realized they can integrate once to the single API and get access to the entire world. And then they use Zooz as a partner to help implement them in new countries. So there may be a new payment type that they needed to support. There may be a new acquiring relationship. But the main focus here is that they don't have to redevelop every single time they go into a new country.
They can just use
they
your
got
platform.
It automatically from
That's
Zooz.
great. That's great. Is there anything else on the horizon that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, there's some great stuff as far as some of the newer technologies that are coming out and the newer payment types. Another great one that I happen to love is PayPal. Okay. So again, you don't have to do a straight PayPal integration separate from your acquiring integration. It's sitting on the Zooz platform itself. And when you get into some of the other countries, especially like China, I love Alipay and what Alipay's been able to do. So good example with that is if you wanted to go into China with your application, let's say you created some kind of Apple mobile app. If you wanted to go into China, the first thing you'd probably want to realize is figure out who the acquirers are. But then the next thing you'll realize is, the majority of the people over there don't use Visa and MasterCard. So unless you support China UnionPay, Alipay, and PayEasy, you're not going to have very much success in transacting business over there. So as we turn on more and more of those alternative payment types, what we'll be able to do is help app developers, merchants, and websites out there become more successful because they're able to take a lot of additional payment types and allow customers to pay with what they want to pay with versus trying to force what we have in the U.S. on across the rest of the world.
Right. Yeah. Great. Well, that's really exciting. We're going to be watching you closely.
Yeah, that's some fun.
And thank you so much for your time today, and thanks for watching.